Kaleigh Wiese, and I own a company called Méldeen, and we are a luxury stationery provider, and we have an intense curated process, which makes us really unique in the industry. We specialize in woods, metals, unusual materials, and some pretty awesome paper, and we work with brides worldwide. I had a small business branding company back in 2007, and a couple of our clients had children getting married, or them themselves were getting married, and they just weren't finding what they were wanting, looking online or looking in a book. So they started coming to us saying, can you design the graphics for our wedding and the tangible pieces? And so after that happened like 4 times, we were like, there's a niche here. And that was like pre-Pinterest, so it was like so almost, we took it in like a corporate angle, like getting to know them, kind of like developing a brand. And it went from 4 to 20 to 100 in the first year, and then we kind of backed it off. And now we just really specialize in creating, something that really makes guests say, wow, what is this? I've never seen this material before, or, this is an unusual way to have, like, it's scented, or it's, got an interesting texture, or it's a piece of, like, flappy leather, And then when they show up the day of, it's so cohesive. So that's how it just was a need that we saw, and we fulfilled it. We recently had a bride who loved this particular artist, and that artist makes a lot of home interior pieces and textiles, and we actually had the artist produce wallpaper that we then incorporated into the liner, incorporated into other paper elements throughout. So it was kind of overall a large pattern, and so each guest kind of received a little segment of this larger picture, which I think has such a beautiful backstory. So that's one of our recent favorites. We've also had the opportunity to produce some really fun rustic out-of-the-box things. One of them, we created leather envelopes, and we literally bought 50 hides, had them cut, had them sewn, had them wax sealed, closed, and they all mailed vertical, which is really fun, instead of horizontal. So that was a really fun kind of hand-holding, very long months and months of, developing that. We also worked with a handbag designer who has a signature pattern that she uses kind of on everything, and we were able to laser cut that pattern on some of her paper pieces, so people really didn't know. It was more of a personal element, but I think that makes those little details make things really special. In May, I started developing a peer-to-peer platform for people to rent out their closets, specifically with vintage garments and really high-end designer stuff. It'll essentially allow anyone who has a closet to rent out their pieces for 20% of the current consignment rate, and then it'll allow anyone to have a unique piece for a wedding or for an event without actually having to commit to purchasing it. So we can all work on our capsule wardrobes. So it's awesome. It's been developing and brewing for a while, and probably in early May, one evening, it just started coming to me, and I was writing it all down, and it literally all has been so, I don't know, came from somewhere. So it's been amazing. So when we talk about the creative process with a couple, a lot of times, you end up with one piece that's in an envelope. And I think to describe to people the process and really the journey that each piece has been on, that most of our finished pieces end up having 15 plus vendors. We have someone who's making the paper, we have someone who's cutting the paper, we have someone who's, cutting the liner, putting in the liner, then we have someone doing calligraphy. There's so many different steps to make up that one piece. We call them creative partners, not vendors, because we're very relationshiply involved with them. We love artisans who kind of have their own niche. So we have a foiler who does edge foiling out of New York, and they are the best, and they're one of the only ones that I know of that do that type of technique. So it's difficult finding those little mom and pop kind of shops that have the personality, but are able to do things that really, if you would call a regular printer, they're going to tell you that's not possible. So we really work with them all, they're all over the world, depending on who's the best doing, what we're looking for. I think the hardest part, I've always had a studio out of my home, and I know a lot of people struggle with that. For me, I find it to be a very safe place and a very motivating space. I think the most difficult part is delegating. And I think I heard from a few business people, the goal is to delegate 80% and only be doing 20%, either through other vendors or through interns or through other help. And I think that can be very difficult when you have the idea and you know what the end result is, and giving that trust to people has been a challenge. I also think doing things that I'm not motivated to do, accounting, bookkeeping. I don't like being on the phone, so listening to voicemails regularly, responding to those voicemails, all of the heartbeat of the business is necessary. So I think getting over and figuring out when, for me, I have the most motivation in the morning. So I use that motivation to do my QuickBooks, to respond to those emails. Otherwise, if it's the afternoon, I want to work on the fun stuff. I don't want to be doing the things that I'm naturally not, drawn to want to do. I would definitely designate a space. I think is really important to working from home because you can close the door. I try not to trinkle other business stuff throughout my house just so it's not I can kind of get away from it. I also know as a woman, I feel like we all juggle many elements. We're wives or we're mothers or all of those things, and it's hard to separate that when you're in all of those things are in the same space. So for me, I found when I go to bed at night, having my home clean or picked up makes me feel less stressed about having that box of being a homemaker open. So that allows me to kind of shut that door and be working when I'm working. And I think there's little tricks that I'm feeling guilty because my house isn't clean, or I'm feeling guilty because I'm not spending time with my spouse. I think just setting those boundaries, and knowing, okay, for me, when my husband says he's coming home from work, it's okay, red flag. I have a good 45 minutes to wrap up, and a lot of times I'll greet him and then, let him know over dinner, hey, I need to work another hour or 2 hours, especially with garment exchange building. So I think just setting those boundaries and kind of segmenting those boxes and that we're all juggling, I think it's been the best. But I think everyone will find their own rhythm in that. I think for me, scheduling is really helpful. So I know I want to be at my desk from this time to this time, and I'm also scheduling that break. So I feel over lunch, maybe it's 30 minutes. I know I'm sitting in my backyard with a magazine that I want to be reading, and I'm eating my lunch and kind of downing. And then I know, okay, then I'll transition. It's literally, if I'm not going to respond to an email in 30 minutes, no one is going to die. But I think we all put that pressure on ourselves to do more and do more and do more when, it's not worth pushing yourself when it's not the end of the world kind of situation. So scheduling out time, I think, is really important. I really struggle with social media, I want to come across authentic all the time. And when you are being authentic and everyone else essentially is not being authentic on social media, you're not going to be able to get ahead. Not that you don't have to be authentic. So I personally kind of use different platforms for different things. So on Facebook, most of my friends or family is very close to me. It's private. I post silly things. I post, look, here we are. We're going to this event, or look at this great food. I really try with Instagram to be very curated. So it's either my dogs, it's either us on the lake, it's either something super luxury. So my following knows that's what they're going to see when they're following me. And although that's a segment of my life, it's a very curated segment of authenticity. It's just so curated. I think lots of people have lots of feedback about this. I think it's a challenge for everyone because it does become an insecurity issue, I think, of trying to figure out, how do I want to be represented? Well, I'm not even the person I want to be, representing. So that's kind of different. And then with Twitter, I've been doing a lot of networking, or silly quotes or inspirational quotes that I think people want to be inspired by. To find trends, I think, is looking at a lot of different mediums. We look at a lot of fashion, we look at a lot of interiors, and all of that kind of speaks down to tangible, everyday people stuff. I do a lot of Pinteresting. I'm very inspired, at least for Méldeen, with package design. So a lot of times in the grocery store, I'll see a texture or pattern or a material that I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's doable. We've been talking about doing more scented things, and that pretty much just came out of like a good lotion that we had in the office. So I think it really is like, most of the time we're literally throwing ideas against the wall that are like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, or you're like, oh, there might be something there, let's explore that. So I think not holding yourself back to developing like these crazy thoughts, or, you know, for photographers, like what happens if I go here and, you know, I'm shooting from this angle or whatever. It's like, well, you might as well try it, like it might stick, might not. So I love to tell women it's always worth taking the first step. And I think there's no risk in at least pursuing the first step of something. And I think a lot of times either the door is closed after the first step, or it begins the momentum of actually developing it. But I think you always live with no regrets by